I will say, what we have found is they switch home ranges seasonally. I've seen deer winter and summer, the same deer 5 miles apart. During the breeding season, go spend its time in one 500-acre area, and then come spring, go back to its spring-summer range 5 miles away and walk the same path back the next year to the same breeding area home range, and then go back. And I've seen multiple deer that have done this. And so, well, we don't see him, he's dead. No, he might just be using a different area, his summer home range. I've seen others that shift their home range from year to year and never go back. And these are some dominant individuals. They're all different. So the deer you see on your property this year, he may not be back, but it may not be because he's dead.
And like I said before, it was the home range and home range excursion study. So you've done a lot of work with that. I'm curious on if that kind of ties in with what we're talking about with the hunting pressure, because I do want to get into whitetail buck home ranges with you, because I know you've done a lot of work on that. So does it tie in?
I don't think excursions are driven by hunting pressure. When we're talking excursions, I'm talking about so a home range. You'll have a deer or you'll have an animal that occupies that scientifically we'll say there's a 95% probability that they are in this area. And think about any one of the listeners to this podcast, or you guys think about it. You have a home range. It consists of your house, maybe your place of work. It might be where you're taking little Susie or little Jimmy to gymnastics or baseball, the grocery store, whatever that is. Mine involves home campus and whatever it is. We all have a home range. But we have times when we go outside of that and we make what we called in that study an extra home range movement. Moving outside, something that's an excursion that's not inside that normally defined area where we're spending time. I don't think our pressure is driving deer out of their home ranges, to make them make these excursions. Rather, I think these excursions are driven biologically. They're driven by dispersal. They're driven by breeding, or they're driven by seasonal patterns. I've seen them for kind of those 3 or 4 different reasons is what we've seen. But I think these deer are really good. Okay, this is my home range. This is where I stay when the temperature gets hot, when there's hunters in the woods and pressure's on. I'm going to go to those spots that I know historically I'm safe from. I can go there. It might just be a little tiny 1 acre, just real thick and nasty that nobody sets foot in. I've seen it I've seen a couple things in Michigan, these little thickets. We used to do little deer drives, and my aunt and uncle would take me and say, okay, we're going to go to this spot, we're going to push through, we're going to see if we can push out. And it's a little 1 acre thicket on the side of a road, so, with a parking lot next to it, and it's like, this isn't deer hunting. Well, there's a big dang deer comes running out of there because it's learned. And we went back there a week later, that deer was in there again. But it learned, it ran out the other side. I think you see these things. But, you're talking about the excursions. We found that young bucks, when they're dispersing, about a year of age, they start to go and establish a new home range away from mama. And they'll go out and they'll begin to go explore. Why they select a certain area, I don't know. We have bucks that are going on that we've seen that they go on these excursions and go explore new areas. I've always felt it's because that buck is having trouble from a competition perspective. Boy, it's tough here. I need to go somewhere else to see if I've got any breeding opportunities. And you might see him we've seen him go on a 2-mile jaunt straight out and then 2 miles straight back. 5 miles out, spend the night, 5 miles straight back. Or go on some sort of loop. But we see them go on these excursions. And then there's a third one that we've seen. We see the females go on excursions. And what we find is there's an increased probability of these females going on excursions in the couple of days leading up to when they go into heat, which I think is they're trying to advertise themselves to as many bucks as possible, which increases the probability of getting a good quality mate.
So with you guys measuring these core areas or home ranges all over the state, because I think it was 2 different WMAs and 2 different timber properties.
Yeah, there were some areas of private property,
and they were all over the state, different sides of the state, like very far apart. Did you see consistency with maybe mature deer of how large their home range typically was?
It's variable. I mean, there's a lot of variability, and you're going to find that home range size is a function of 4 factors. It's going to be a function of sex. Males tend to have greater home range size than females. It's going to be a function of season. It's larger in the winter and the breeding season. It's going to be a function of density. The higher the density, the smaller the home range.
Vegetation density?
A density of deer.
Oh, okay.
Population density. The more deer that are out there, the smaller the home range. So you really see this inside of a high fence. Those high fences, you'll see these bucks, close down to 200 acres. That's all they use, up until it's the rut. But they just use 200 acres instead of 600 acres. And then with habitat quality, as habitat quality goes up, home range size goes down. And those are pretty good rules for any species.
That makes perfect sense.
Yep.
And then now with the hunting pressure, tying back into it, do you feel like the hunting pressure on any one area would cause a home range to move? Because you'll see people will be like, well, this buck lived over here and then he just disappeared. He changed home ranges. You'll hear that from time to time. Do you think that's factual?
I don't think so. I think they probably, number one is I don't think anybody knows where they're living. We can put out some cameras, but that doesn't mean that you don't know everywhere they're going, number one. I don't know so much that they're switching home ranges. They might just be using a different portion of their home range a little more as the pressure increases on one side. So if excuse me, if a hunter has 400 acres that they're hunting, that may only be half the area that this deer is using. Or there may be only 200 acres of that 400 acres that buck's actually using, and there's another 500 acres somewhere else that deer's going. And if you really think about it, 600 acres is only a mile across. Even this old guy can walk that in 15 minutes. It's for a deer, it's nothing to cross that, to cross that home range. So it's not very far. It's just across campus is all that is. So I don't think they're really switching home ranges so much. But I will say, what we have found is they switch home ranges seasonally. I've seen deer winter and summer, the same deer 5 miles apart. During the breeding season, go spend its time in one 500-acre area, and then come spring, go back to its spring-summer range 5 miles away and walk the same path back the next year to the same breeding area home range and then go back. And I've seen multiple deer that have done this. And so, we don't see him, he's dead. Well, he might just be using a different area, his summer home range. I've seen others that shift their home range from year to year and never go back. And these are some dominant individuals. They're all different. So the deer you see on your property this year, he may not be back, but it may not be because he's dead.
Yeah, I got a deer like that.
Does habitat play a big factor in that? As in, is there any correlation at all with quality habitat, with the size of an excursion?
I don't know. Nope. I don't think anybody's really looked at that. The excursions are hard to measure, and really that stuff that we published, that was with a graduate student, Todd Jacobson. I think everybody had been, and this may be a little arrogance on my part, but I think everybody had been measuring excursions wrong. So we did it a different way, and what we did was, what everybody had been doing before was putting together all the locations for that deer and said, this is the home range, but in the middle of that time, You're measuring whether or not it went outside of that. Well, I don't think you can actually measure the excursion because that excursion is actually part of the home range you constructed. So we did it differently. We just looked at the previous 60 days of use and was checking to see if they went to a new area compared to the previous 60 days. So ours was a little bit different in the way we looked at it, but nobody's really looked at this stuff. It's just, it hasn't been important to people.
Would you have a theory on that by any chance, or any thoughts on that?
Thoughts on what
On
exactly?
quality habitat affecting positive or negative to shifting of home ranges and or extensive excursions?
If an animal has the resources available to it, it doesn't have any reason to go elsewhere. And if you go back to the reasons I said they're going on excursions, it's because of resource limitation. Number one, a juvenile buck, a year-old buck, needs a new area that is not its mother's. I need new space. A doe is going and looking for breeding opportunities, resource. And three, a buck going out and looking for breeding opportunities, limited if it's a lower quality buck, limited opportunities for breeding. If there's limited resources, they are going to go look for it. But you kind of think about this as, well, the neighbor puts out all my deer leave because my neighbor's is feeding corn, so I have to feed corn. Well, just because your neighbor put out corn doesn't know that your deer know about it. It's not like there's a message board that says, yo, there's corn over here. They have to know it's there somehow. So they have to have wandered over there. Now, we talked about these excursions. In the study that we did at Brosnan Forest, we had 2 bucks that all of a sudden, they went 5 miles, they went off the property, and they went to a soybean field. They didn't smell it. That's not how they had been there at some point in their life before, at that time. I don't know if that was their natal home range, or they had learned it from another deer and followed them out there, or one of these bucks knew it and the other one just followed them. But one of those deer had known that field was there last year or the year before, and that's why they're going. Quality. There's a quality resource there that I want that's not available where I am.
So and we're going to get off kind of the hunting pressure aspect of this conversation, but from a person who owns property and can manipulate a habitat on property, what should that tell them about how they should focus on that property based off like that amount of research?
Well, I'm going to go back to pressure and habitat. I'm going to combine the pressure and the habitat. What resources are deer going to value on your property? There's 3 things. It's food, it's mates, and it's lack of pressure. We always worry about food. Well, I need corn feeders and I need food plots. You want to increase the number of, the way bucks move on your property, attract does, but at the same time, I think you shoot them. Because the more does you have, the easier it is for them to lock on bucks. You want them searching for them. But number 3, to have areas on your property that are where there's no pressure. A sanctuary, 5-acre thicket that you never set foot in. That deer knows I have never smelled a human in here. A little 10-acre thicket over there, a 2-acre thing. You never go in there except to retrieve a wounded deer. You don't go looking for sheds. You don't go. Now you've provided the 3 things that a deer is looking for during hunting season: food, mates, and security. That's what I look at from a habitat perspective. I was on the phone with the guy yesterday calling, how should I set this up? I said, you got 100 acres. I can't help you. There's nothing you can do. You're at the mercy of your landowners. But what you can do is you can make them feel safe there. That's the way I would approach it from a habitat perspective.